Hello, I'm Marky Dragon, also known as Marcus Eikenberry in real life, and welcome to another Roundtable with Shroud of the Avatar. We have a special guest with us tonight. It's Rick Holtrop. I should have a few more drinks. Actually, I haven't had any yet. Maybe I should get started. So, anyway, I don't know if we didn't make a topic tonight because, well, we just figured that people would have plenty of questions for Rick and we would just pummel him.
I tried to get in front of that. I did. Hopefully I over-prepared for just hanging out with you guys, but you know, I kind of got my own little list of stuff that I will allow myself to talk about. And mostly, as I was saying right before we started this, I kind of just went backwards, and our guys did a great dev chat earlier this week that I didn't sit in on, and so I reviewed that this morning and was just so pleasantly surprised with all the stuff that they were talking about. So I have a feeling we'll find some cool topics to talk about.
So, Rick, tell us exactly who you are as related to the game.
Currently, my position is associate producer, which was a fun title to grab for myself. Probably more descriptive of what I'm doing right now is project manager. We use the Scrum/Agile methodology of running the project. So I do the Scrum Master bit where I get up the whole team in a circle in the morning. We talk about what we've done and what we're going to do, and then I go put all that into spreadsheets and databases to measure that progress all week long. That takes up about 75% of my time. The other 25% of my time I try to get some design stuff in. I've been working with Richard for a long time. I came into Origin in 1996 just as we were getting ready to push Ultima Online into QA, which is where I was at the time. And over the next couple of years, I was able to get to know some of the devs a lot better at the time, which of course included Richard, but also guys like Scott Jones, who just started working with us this week, our environmental artist, and he worked on UO and went on to art lead on Ascension, Ultima 9, and so I still like getting my feet wet in design, and thankfully Richard likes me getting my feet wet in design. Sometimes I'll creep away from it and lose myself in my spreadsheets, but he always pulls me back in. Just recently he had me do the design kickoff for getting our modular pieces for our dungeon sets ready to go, which is a pretty standard thing that everybody's done a couple times through different games. But it was a lot of fun to work with Richard and make sure that his vision for what he wanted the system to start off as. It was fun to go back into that design hole, and then of course I did that, and a couple days later I figured out I hadn't updated my spreadsheets in a couple days, so the end of my week was just back to project management hell. But it's fun. It kind of gives me an overview of everything that's going on.
So, for those who are joining us who have not heard about Shroud of the Avatar, just in like 5 sentences, tell us what Shroud of the Avatar is.
Shroud of the Avatar is a return to Richard Garriott RPGs, you know, the old school kind, the ones that he loved doing the most. Ultimas 1, 2, and 3, even as he describes it, were kind of him getting his feet wet, and then Ultimas 4, 5, and 6, and 7, and even 8 and 9 had a lot of parts of them, but you know, some of those classics like Ultima 4 and Ultima 7 and Ultima 6, it's finally a return to that style of RPG. But bringing it into the future and making sure that it's multiplayer and figuring out the intricacies of what that means. You know, as great as Ultima Online was, it certainly wasn't a fusion of single-playerness into multiplayerness. And so I think this is finally Richard gets a chance to do what he really wanted to move on to next after Ultima Online.
Great. So we've got some other people here with us. Christian, hello. You're not saying nothing much.
Hello.
Hello, Christian.
And then we got Frank. Hey, Frank.
Howdy.
And then we got Robert. Hello,
hey,
Robert.
How's it going?
And we've got Fear.
Yeah.
And in the live thing here, let's see here. I'll post in here. We've got a couple of spots left in here if anyone wants to join us. So in Twitch chat, I am posting a link to join us here. So I saw this. I saw that there was several people added to the team recently. And one of them was Scott Jennings, who was a very avid player of Ultima Online. Very funny player, too.
Yes.
So, also known as Lum the Mad. What is he?
He's just as funny in real life. I was saying right before we started, I actually got to know Scott through a different route on my way through many different mini jobs over my years in development. I did a couple years writing database tools, and I gave a talk at a game developer conference on some database tools, integrating them into Perforce and integrating those into projects. And there was a guy sitting in the audience. We talked afterwards, and it was Scott Jennings at the time. Didn't know who he would become, and then he and I had the pleasure of working together for a while at NCSoft, and the great pleasure of working together with him again here on Shroud. I think he's going to be a good sounding board for all the kind of the back and forth of our internal fights between PvPers versus the PvEers, which is myself and probably the ultimate Care Bear on the team. So Lung has a good ribbon with me, and most importantly, he's an awesome worker, and he really knows his tech side of stuff. And immediately, like the first day that he was on with us, he picked up the ball for private developer forums and private developer chats, which we're going to start with soon, which kind of segued just into upgrading everybody's forums and stuff. And so, man, just in the short time that we've had Scott actually doing work for us, it's been great. But the lunches where we have our design talks have also been much livelier for his presence.
Mm-hmm. So, Fear, how do you feel hearing that Rick is the ultimate Care Bear?
Well, he's we talked about that a little bit, and I said that's okay. He can we need those too. You gotta have some cannon fodder running around.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
I was more excited. I was really excited that Lum the Mad was on the team since he's one of my oldest adversaries. And
I truly expect Lum to add humor into the game. I would love to see some of his humor in the game.
He calls it snark.
Snark? Well, whatever it is, whatever that special sauce is, let's put some in.
Richard has a great love for his sense of humor, and I think that's why he's with us. And I think it's an easy bet that brand of humor will make it into the game because of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
But yeah, so you guys who are definitely on the PvP side, you don't have to worry. I am sorely underrepresented on the team, which is why very early on I put myself out there as, anybody who wants a Care Bear's point of view, come ask me, and I'll tell you how to dart outside of town to get a little bit of lumber real quick, and then jump back inside town before anybody sees me.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's your chance for some fodder there.
Yeah, that's when we wait for you.
Use that hiding skill and sit behind a tree.
Yeah.
I miss those days. I had a lot of fun doing QA on Ultima Online when I first came on. I did a couple things like Privateer 2 and some of the James Longbow games, but it was definitely my desire to move on to the Ultima Online testing team because I grew up playing Richard's games. Somewhere around 9 or 10 years old is when I found Ultima 4 and then went back to Ultima 3, and it's been all Ultima for me since. Thinking earlier about just kind of my history in case it came up. I remember after we shipped Ultima 9, had a lot of great talks with Richard about what he saw in his mind to be Ultima X at the time. This must be like early 2000, late 1999 Ultima X talks, and it was weird to think back to those days because, as we were talking about before, those are the things that he's finally really getting to push in a new game, in a new RPG that really is out of his mind, but very much metered by those around him, not just the development team, but man, all the Kickstarter backers. It's been a crazy, weird, new thing for us to go through this, and I try to always remind myself. I think I have it written down right here. We currently have 24,787 backers, and I call them stakeholders because of the methodology we use for running the project. I try to always think of them as stakeholders and people that have a vested interest in how the game turns out, and so definitely worth listening to, and a lot of time on the forums and stuff.
Right. Frank, you're awful quiet. What's on your mind?
Interesting.
He's probably trying to unmute himself after I muted him.
Dang it!
Ah, yes, I'm awfully quiet because you have me muted. So, I don't know. Some people like heavy breathing.
Not when
I
it's a
was-
bunch of guys on here, though.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't know. I watched the chat and I watched them talk about the additional members to the team, and I don't really have any questions other than, um, they put out ideas on the website, and I wonder, after they get these 10 pages of people arguing back and forth about what they'd like to see, at what point do they uh, pull that information and kick it around the table and make a decision and then put it to bed?
The flow of it really has been, I think Brandon Cotton on our team, known as B, gentleman with the long blonde hair, usually once or twice during the week, he takes a full amount of time to go over the forums. There's sometimes people throw out a task like, we need somebody to go spend 15 minutes on the forum, and I think part of the reason why B is the best at it is because he recognizes that 15 minutes on the forum, you don't get a lot out of it. You need to spend sometimes a whole day going over everything and figuring out the 90% that may not be relevant at the moment, and the 10% that really matters, and to go over that. And so he does that a couple times a week, and then that stuff naturally just kind of floats into our conversations. Talked about how we moved into different offices recently, and we're in a much tighter space. It's still comfortable, but everybody's so close together, and they'll start B and Chris Spears will start a conversation about stuff that he's read on the forums, and people are arguing about this, and here's the plus and minus, or here's an idea we've never even thought of, but man, this sounded really cool. And so the flow of it really is, that stuff kind of goes on in the forums, and we do our best, the best we can to stay on them in a timely fashion. But when that doesn't happen, it feels good to have guys like B who take it seriously enough where they'll spend a day or two to really kind of collect those thoughts as his own, and then get it out to the rest of the team. And then that's usually what will inform or define somebody else that has a high level of ownership of one of those topics to go, damn man, I need to go check out that forum posting that I've been missing. And also Gina's really good about identifying the stuff that you're talking about. Fire Lotus, our community manager, and she sends stuff out to our development mailing lists all the time to get people's eyes on it. So it's a really organic thing, and I think it really only survives because we operate on such a small team. If we had 50 to 100 people, I don't know how that would work. But we're so small, we're so tight, everybody has their hands in everything, despite Lum coming on and going straight to work on technology. I think that his time might even be more than 25% of just kind of getting into those discussions that we're talking about right now. And I know he likes to be active socially on the forums and stuff, so I think he's going to be another fantastic conduit for bringing those conversations from the forums into the team, and he has his own personal style and outlook on those things. So I think that the PvP side is probably even better represented on that side with him coming in. Care Bear stuff can be pretty easy to figure out sometimes. Just make a fun game, make sure I can huddle up in my house and craft away like I want to. And then, of course, Richard and Tracy's story crafting stuff. I'm so looking forward to seeing the story unfold that these guys are putting together.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I'm the Care Bear of this group.
All right.
I'll just stop there.
Well, you guys can team up, and you'll have better defenses by running around in a group.
The best defense is, I don't know, no defense. It's going to be interesting to see. Richard likes to talk a lot about what it's going to mean to die in the game too. He's very fiction oriented, and how can we look at everything and make that work with the fiction of the game. And so sometimes the Care Bearer in me just doesn't have to worry about dying, and Richard may fix that for depending on your viewpoint on that to a point where a Care Bearer doesn't just get to carelessly worry about letting themselves die, whether it's through a full loot mechanism or something even more story driven.
Right.
So, whoever's got something on their mind, speak up.
Oh, I got something on my mind. So, kind of keeping an eye on things that we've been going on through at the office and recognizing what's coming up. I think we're just about to finally hit 2.25 million. which informs the original stretch goal we had from Kickstarter to start working on some mod tools, and I think we're going to move forward on that still. We're going to start, it's time to start looking into mod tools, or at least get that on the schedule as something that's going to get done before it's all over.
And what are mod tools?
Yeah, it's a great question. Depends on who's looking at it sometimes. At its grandest level, I think when it's talked about, somebody says, we need to be able to mod your game, they intend to rip out the graphics wholesale and put their own level of graphics in. I think there's some Skyrim mods that overhaul the entire game into a Game of Thrones themed world, from not just the text and the fiction, but down to the art level. And I really need to check that out one of these days. So at the grand level, you have mod tools allow you to do that. I don't do many mods for the Skyrim that I played. There was one mod tool I downloaded that allowed the death cam. When you die in Skyrim, after about 5 seconds, it just automatically loads your last save game. And I downloaded a mod that said, stop making that happen. Sometimes I want to look at my carcass just laying there dead. Sometimes there's people fighting over me and I want to see that. And so that mod, I think, was a simple 3 lines of code that because Skyrim allows modding, somebody was able to write those 3 lines of code and be able to kind of plug it into the game and modify the game. So it's a really wide subject depending on who's talking about it, who's looking at it, ranging from anywhere to small tweaks on how you play the game to massively overhauling the whole thing.
When you guys get kind of an outline of what that's going to mean, we would certainly like to hear about it. So, but at this point, it sounds like a lot of speculation.
I think that's an area where we can solicit a lot of feedback, because when something is, when it's that wide, we definitely need to identify what all of our backers feel are most important, and then we pare that list down, of course, with what's most possible. And I think some of those simple things are really easy to look for at the beginning. Some of those things are just even developer cheats. While we're making the game, I need to turn something like the death cam off, and just remembering to make sure that we expose that stuff to the public. So I think we have our own job to do, but we're going to solicit a lot of feedback for what people would like, and then in the developer chats, in the private developer chats, I think we'll be talking a lot about that. That's actually something I want to write down to remember it's a good starting point for a lot of that stuff. But so the reason I started there was our 2.25 million stretch goal is mod tools, and we're definitely going to be working towards making that happen. But past that, I think 2.5 million was a bunch of VR support. But we really need to start coming up with some more stretch goals past that. So as you said, if somebody's got a topic, throw out there. I had written down early, if there was a lull in conversation and we can't think of anything, I'd love to hear brainstorms of what you guys feel would be cool stretch goals, both kind of standard stuff, but even thinking outside of the box stuff that we might never come up with.
Well, I have one. I've always, even back in the day, I've always tried to get them. I think one of the stretch goals should be a castle for fear.
No. It's got to be a dragon named Marky.
Well, you could have that, but I want a castle for fear. I've been trying to get them to give me that for 20 years, and I just haven't. I don't know. Maybe they lost the list or something.
All right. Well, you guys think I may not be writing this down, but I am.
Yeah, Lum the Mad will remember that one.
Yes. So let's see. We have is it Wouter that's joined us, and so we have a couple of you that haven't spoke up yet. Wouter, Robert, and Christian. If you guys have anything you'd like to bring up, please do.
I have a kind of question about the items, the manufacturing and stuff, like blacksmithing. Mm-hmm. But like a lot of games nowadays, like UO is one of those games where you could build something and everything had a use. EVE Online, you can manufacture something, everything has a use. Like every item in the game you can actually use and has a use for it. But a lot of games nowadays, you build an item and it's worthless in like a level or two. I know you guys kind of stated you guys are going to be doing a level base, but only for the purpose of giving you skills. So a level won't determine, between a level 1 and a level 10. It just tells you have more skills than the other guy. Right. Items going to be the same way, where everything's going to have a use. Everything's going to be useful versus being, 10 levels and it's no longer good anymore.
That's maybe that last little bit you added is a finer point to it, because that's something that had a use for a while. And And I think that's probably more in the hands of the guys that not just, define the economy, but a lot of that balancing of loot and gear. But in general, your question, it's one of Richard's mandates. There's no way that he will allow us to build a game where we are creating things that don't not just even have momentary uses, but meaningful uses. And if there's a door in a game, it needs to be unlocked and lead to somewhere. And if there's something in the game, you need to be able to use it. If you look at it and think it should be used, then it should be able to be used. And so that's at its most basic level for things sitting around like a chair or an apple on the table. But it definitely bleeds out as a mandate into all of the rest of the systems. If there is a stat for a character, it must be there for a meaningful reason. And if there's going to be items on a crafting table, a series of crafting steps, that it better be meaningful to the game. And those are the things that make our jobs a little bit more difficult. It would be nice if we were able to be lazy and just throw stuff out there. But to answer your question, Richard's not going to let us be lazy. Richard's going to make sure that everything in the game has a use. And then the finer point will have to be figured out kind of by the combat guys and the gear guys. And from listening to them, especially Chris Spears, I think he has a dislike for what you're asking about. So my guess would be there's a really good bet that they're working towards making sure that you don't out-level something. Like, man, I really love this thing, and I leveled up, and now it's a piece of junk, and I should get rid of it. They don't want that. They don't want that happening.
That's good.
That also interests me that some of the games I've played, that they're like buildings that you can't look in the windows, you can't go inside of them, you can't do anything with them, and so they're just like a big block that's in the way. And from far away they might make the aesthetics of a little town or whatever, but when you get close up, you're like, well, there's nothing to do here, nothing to do here, nothing to do here, and I'm just kind of envisioning that if you're able to walk into every building, the buildings might be empty or whatnot, might not be anybody living there, but if the chance of finding that, oh, this house is completely furnished and oh, there's a bed. Well, my character's tired. He's going to lay down for a little bit.
And hey, all of a sudden you're a squatter.
I know.
A squatter for sleeping in 100 unowned beds, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A little achievement.
Achievement.
Yeah, a little achievement.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about achievements, and there was a lot of talk about it during the Kickstarter time, and I definitely think we're going to have achievements in the games. There's so many different ways to envision those and implement those. My particular favorite way is kind of through titles. When I played Lord of the Rings online, I was such a big fan of just the ridiculous number of titles that they would throw out for things like you've killed 10 wolves, and so you get the wolf killer title, and now I've killed 100 wolves, and so now I have the wolf slayer title maybe. And to me, that's an achievement system, but it's blended with the world so fantastically that I look forward to when the time comes for us to really figure out what our achievement/title system means. That's when my ears perk up and I get excited about jumping into some of the design talks at that point.
Okay. Nobody else is speaking up.
Well, so there's one I can throw out to you guys. Not just for this hangout, but for further coming up hangouts until the group really gets together and decides hard and fast what some of our stretch goals will be. But now would be a good time over the next week or so. As people have ideas, those are great times to throw it out. I'm looking over everything the guys were talking about in the last dev chat. They talked about how they've made some decisions on bags finally. I know the internal discussions we've been having about the lot sizes of player housing, that stuff is finally coming to, we've iterated enough times in both viewpoints to really kind of figure out finer points of stuff, and then we brought Mike Hutchison on board, and he really, for his first week with us, did some really cool town design. So a lot of those base level questions that we really had to figure out exactly what they're going to be because they inform and block so much other stuff. That stuff is starting to really get nailed down, and so the speed at which some of the systems we're looking at, like, okay, it's time to begin working on this system or that system, and we can't do it because this decision hasn't been made. We're running out of decisions that haven't been made, and so we're really about to start moving full speed.
That's really cool.
We moved. We got into some really nice new. I think Chris said, it's summertime in Texas. We actually work in a place where we can count on the air conditioning working. That'll be good for getting some work done, I think.
Yeah. And a new camera for your dev chats.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened with her. Had I been in the room, I'm sure everything would have been perfect, but I was sitting at my desk with my nose in spreadsheets.
Wow.
So what kind of team size are we looking at? So currently you kind of indicate that we're under 50 people, and
much lower than that. I think we're hovering right around 20 right now, and I don't know that we'll, depending on budgetary stuff, but what we were looking at for the moment, or even looking backwards to the forward planning, the 4 guys that we just brought on, we knew we needed those guys to really fill in those holes as everybody started getting stretched thin. Up next is a character artist, and after that, for the time being, that's about it for the time being. We know the abilities and the head count that we have, and it's looking really good. So I would say the number's somewhere right around 20, actually.
That's interesting. Because it seems like the scope of the game is pretty deep.
And you really it's what was going through my mind as we talked about the difference between going through a town and seeing a bunch of houses and getting up to the house and seeing like, oh, it's boarded up, I can't even look through the window. That brings the scope of the game down because you don't have to decorate the innards of those houses. And so those are some of the discussions that we have with Richard, when Richard throws out things like, if there's a house in town, you need to be able to, you can't just board it up, you have to be able to go in there and do it. And so you have to identify that kind of thing can quickly spiral the scope of the game out of control if you're not careful.
Right.
And Richard actually really didn't even need to be taught too much about that because I'm trying to think of a good example recently. A good example is we were prototyping a modular set of not castle walls, but like town walls that you would build around the town. And on the inside of those walls, there were stairs up to a platform so that you could see over the walls. And there were 2 levels of that. There was an internal level and an upper level. And looking at that, Richard quickly identified, well, my thought process is if I see that second level, there better be a good use for that level, which means that the world builders are going to have to spend a lot of time decorating out those second levels. This is maybe a small example, but the decision there was, well, if we don't have a good use for that second level, let's get it out of there because it doesn't mean much fictionally, and all it's going to do is slow us down in the scope of the game. And then we can take that same approach with houses to try to make sure that we control the scope of in what we're doing, that we're able to get done.
Speaking of fiction, in Twitch chat, Incogni is he's asking, the in-game lore, can I expect something close to what other MMORPGs have? Any plans for releasing a few books? Can you go into more detail?
I think one of our stated stretch goals, I think when we hit 1.8 million, was that Tracy Hickman would be doing some novels, if at all possible. Thinking about the lore and the backstory of other games, it started me talking about Skyrim and just thinking about all the books that you would find in Skyrim. A lot of that stuff has evolved from old Ultima games. I don't know if it was the first one, but I remember in Ultima 6 finding books all over the place, and they really just, I think 95% of those books just added flavor to the world, if not gameplay. And so sometimes it's funny to look at the things that we feel like we're going to inherit in this game. Like, hey, let's make sure we have books like Skyrim had books. And then you look at it and go, no, I think actually let's make sure we have books like Ultima 6 had books.
And I do believe that we have some actual books, like a real book that you can hold in your hands, that is in there as well, right? Weren't we going to get some signed copies of some books, something like that?
Oh, yes. I thought you were talking about physical copies.
Well, no, I mean that's great to talk about that too, because that's an area that I actually hadn't thought of, and it makes sense. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to refresh my mind. Like I said, I couldn't remember the numbers, but I'm pretty sure that's in there somewhere. Because actually, the reason it's in my mind is because it's one of the many things that Richard's going to need to sign. Richard's got a lot of signing to do, and I've got a sticky note on my monitor that says Richard needs to start signing stuff soon. And I believe you're right. I think the book is one of those.
Yeah.
There was a question inside the group chat.
Shoot, I'm ready.
Maybe he wants somebody else to read it, but I haven't seen it yet.
All right. Will there be contested areas? Guild can compete for land in order to gather resources, so the guild can create their own castle or town.
As we move into the details of that question, I'm not sure, but they're definitely at the beginning of the questions. Will there be contested areas? And yes, there will be contested areas. I'm almost positive that bleeds out not just to a single player level, but also to the guild levels. As far as what that means exactly for being able to erect maybe your own town, that's going a little far. That certainly would be nice to hope for, but probably closer to the truth might be that there was already a cap, like, Richard loved the control points that we were able to pull off in Tabula Rasa and really wants to see us do control points again. And the dynamic nature of owning maybe a castle or an encampment that was already built, I think we're definitely going to have that. As we try to stretch beyond that, that would be pretty cool to allow, nothing's there and these guys won the area, so they get to build their version of a guild keep. I think those are things that we move forward if we do all this right and this game lives on in perpetuity. Those are things that we look forward to, and when we do the initial implementation of the system, we try to make sure that we're not handcuffing ourselves, that when we ship the game it might be pre-play stuff that everybody gets to fight for, but we do it in a way where over a couple of expansions that we can stretch it further out. So I think we're pretty close to having what you were asking for there, if not at ship throughout the expansions.
Cool.
All right, so sort of piggybacking on that, if I'm starting the game with a village house somewhere, and I eventually want to buy a hilltop somewhere and put up my own huge castle, is that along the same lines that once that's up, it can become a permanent part of the world, and if I pass on, someone else takes it over?
That's an interesting question about passing on, because there's kind of the in-game passing on, but somebody may decide that I'm no longer going to play this game and I want to pass it on to somebody else. I would say the permanence probably falls out of its taxable state, right? I know that during the Kickstarter period, people that picked up property lots and housing get their stuff tax-free in perpetuity. That seems to inform a level of perpetualness. So that could very well be for those people. Somebody that starts the game just regular and fights their way through the game to have enough gold to own that castle on the hill, they're probably going to have to pay some taxes to keep that thing running. And so I would say as long as they're in the game and active and making sure that they're paying the taxes on that thing is going to be up there. But we'll have to see what exactly it means when the taxman cometh and repo your house from you.
And the house falls, and we pick up all of the stuff, and then we place our own there.
Yeah. Oh, don't tell Richard that. He'll make us do that.
Richard, here, listen to me now.
Oh, here we go.
That is actually one of the most fantastic points of Ultima Online, was the whole deal of it's like a giant treasure hunt, that we'd go around and we'd look at all the houses, we'd look at their signs to see what state of decay they're in, and if they're in the final stage of decay or the second to the final stage of decay, then we'd come by once an hour and look to see when that sign changed to the final, so that we would know an approximate hour of when that house was going to fall. And it was like a treasure hunt, because all of the items would just appear everywhere. And then we would place our own house and everything.
God, that's right. Full loot on house decay. Oh, man.
That's a lot, yeah.
That's that's another reason to pay your taxes. That's I think the really light kind of Care Bearish way to do it, and we're not even moving in that direction. If I remember correctly, in Lord of the Rings Online, I had a house in one of the instanced areas, and I hadn't touched the game in maybe a year and a half. And when I logged on, I don't have access to the house, but because it's in an instanced area, it's still kind of sitting there, and all my things are safe, and they're sitting in a chest. And And so there was very little incentive for me to continue to pay those taxes in the game. I still feel like it's kind of sitting there and safe for me, and it's in an instanced area, so nobody stole it from me while I was gone. And so that model just didn't force me to participate in that game world for a year and a half, where my love of that house might have identified that, like, well, I feel like I'm done with the game, but boy, do I love my house. I better not stop playing.
That happened a lot in UO. That there are a lot of people who just kept paying and paying and paying because they figured, okay, well, maybe later I'm going to want to pick it up and play again. I'm bored with it right now, but I want to come back later and play. And they would just keep paying and paying and paying. And there's people who've been paying for 10 to 15 years on their accounts, which is insane and amazing.
Originally, when you can get the grandfather houses where you could have multiple houses on your plot, on your account. So like I had an account where we had like a castle and 2 keeps and like a tower on one account, and it got grandfathered in, so that you had to pay. Otherwise, you'd lose it all. You'd lose all your houses. So I think we paid for it for like 10 years, and eventually I was like, I'm dead.
Yeah.
Oh, that would have been a good account to pass along. We were talking in the office the other day. I think somebody didn't really understand how housing worked in UO and kind of the premium land right outside of town, as opposed to I've got a house in the middle of the forest. And I think the context of the situation was selling those accounts on eBay, and so like a house in the middle of the forest didn't have much to sell with that account. But man, you had a house right outside of Britain that was all paid up and ready to go. Those were very worthwhile accounts to have.
Yeah, I want to say something about that. I played a game where the houses out alone, away from everybody else, were more valuable than the houses in town. So I wondered if there are going to be these single plots out in the world, whether they're valuable or not.
Yeah, that term valuable is objective, right? What is one person's value is the other, and you and I being the Care Bears, I kind of tend to do the same thing. I like to find a hole somewhere to turtle up where nobody will find me if at all possible. I think the question was, you got me thinking about single housing plots in the middle of nowhere. I don't know that our conversation has gone to that too much. I think the tech is certainly going to be in place for things like that, but up to this point, we've really concentrated on what it's going to mean to have player housing inside of towns and villages and cities. And I think that those are probably the low-level decisions we needed to make. That is, like I was talking about before, just figuring out what it means to have varying plot size, if there is going to be a varying plot size. Once all those decisions are made, some of those questions are easy to answer, and then to take a look at and see what that means to be able to implement that in a random piece of forest in the middle of nowhere that really takes some getting lost to be able to find that. Personally, I would hold that piece of property of higher value for myself than something right outside of town.
Me too. So the guy that asked about the guild castle and whatnot has a follow-up question.
Okay.
He says, if a castle or town is built, it needs to be defended against other players. But will there be something like mobs attacking your town or castle, like a group of goblins or bandits?
I would say that it's a really good bet that there will be. Richard, one of Richard's favorite threads to make sure that he pulls forward into the game are the town sieges. And so that's kind of more in a player housing. If anybody hasn't heard that before, if you have a house in a village, in a town, or a city, from time to time, those installments, those pre-made installments, are going to come under siege by the forces of evil, and that may dictate that you're unable to get into your house for that period of time until everybody can come together and end that siege, or possibly the siege ends after a predetermined period of time. I think if we have that mechanic in the game, and I'm surely positive we will, combine that with if once we're able to have player-created, guild-created installments in town, I'm sure that those two systems will immediately be married, so that at least to me seems like a little bit more interesting gameplay. If there are no other guilds kind of coming after you, it's kind of a lull in action. But from the fictional standpoint of the forces of evil have everything under siege, I would say it's a very good bet that there will be some not player versus environment, I guess guild versus environment gameplay to be had out of that situation.
What about,
PvE.
you talk about, towns being under siege and kind of the strife, and it's kind of a negative action against the players or whatever. How about thief skill, thievery? Will we have thieves in the game? Will we be able to, say, steal from other players or steal from houses or anything like that?
It's been a really important thread to a lot of people. From you get that viewpoint from PvP, and you also get that viewpoint from PvE. One of my favorite things to do in single player PvE stuff is to be able to steal and lockpick. And so I know that those skills have been thrown around, whether or not they fall underneath a tree that's specifically called thieving skills, or, man, I'm trying to think of the word that Chris Spears threw out at one point. That's, it's really just a synonym for thief. So I think those things will be in the game. Whether or not they'll be attached to a package called the thief class, I think maybe that probably won't be in the game, because Richard's desire is to kind of just have the tools out there and not let people say, I want to be a thief, and so here's all this stuff. He wants to give you the tools and skill trees to, I'm going to take a little bit of this. And so I'm pretty confident that those types of things will be in the game. We need to measure to what degree. I think it's really easy to do in a player versus environment aspect. These houses that we're talking about that maybe nobody lives in except for the NPCs, that's really easy to figure out and do. What pickpocketing another player means, or what lockpicking your way into somebody else's house means. I think those things still are deeply understudied, and seeing if there's a way to make not everybody happy. I think that's part of the problem, is figuring out the stuff that doesn't make everybody happy. That sometimes it looks like the things that'll make everybody happy, you put those things in a game, and all of a sudden it's not fun anymore. You're like, oh,
Right.
that was too easy to do this.
You have to. Fun has to be the first rule. So,
Yes.
No. Maybe it was rogue. Was he talking about rogue skills?
No, it was, no, he came up with a word that I was like, oh, that's such a pretty, beautiful word. I would have never thought of attaching
Then
that
we'll
to
hate
a
it. That's
class
what we're
mentality.
Yeah. So we have just a few minutes left
well.
today, and I know time flies when you're having fun, huh?
It does.
Unfortunately, I have another show coming up right after this. So, if there's any of you here who are on the Hangout that have had a question, haven't gotten a chance to ask yet, now's your chance. Or forever hold your peace.
Maybe not forever hold your peace. I kind of dig you guys. I like hanging out here. Not just. I'm certainly going to try and get some of our other guys to show up here and hang out with you guys. But you may see me here again. This is a pretty comfortable way to spend an hour on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
Cool. That's cool.
Good.
So yeah, shoot away. What? Any last minute questions?
Carlos or Christian?
Don't make me start showing off my old swag for
if we're gonna start showing off old swag here, let me just pull out my actual
that.
beta CD.
I
Yeah,
haven't seen one of those
$7 to participate in the beta, and then my 1 year.
Oh
Dragon.
man, what's the number on the underside of that?
$8.92.
Ooh,
I used to
very
have
cool,
two
man.
of them. I gave one to my brother. So
Nice collectibles.
yeah. Okay. Sorry. Didn't mean to hog it.
Can I ask a question about those thief skills again? Not to backtrack, but
No, and please feel free. I feel like maybe I can't answer anything definitively, but everything we talk about, I think, is great stuff to throw back to the guys that are constantly talking about this stuff still.
all right. Well, let me just say, I played World of Warcraft for a little while, and I got a lot of enjoyment out of being able to sneak past things, monsters, and it will have some use in the PvP world as well. But if I can hide, sneak, climb, something that like that, I think that's a really attractive option. I hope those kind of skills make it to the game.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to look at it. I guess sometimes we get caught up in all of the PvP aspects, and that's why I try to. I love talking about the PvE aspects, and you're right, kind of that flow of battle against mobs and how you get in and out of. Sometimes it was really cool when you're playing that roguelike character to just feel like, I'm going to ignore this whole section of fighting in front of me because I have the skills to get through there where somebody else.
Well, that's a very good point because like Frank wants to avoid player-to-player combat and conflict, stuff like that, just like you say that you do, and it. Maybe Frank would use his sneaking skill. He might only be 25% of the speed that he would have before, but he could then sneak through the forest and get through an area that might be really hostile.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, and so I think that particular hiding skill, I think that's another one where we can look back at other games like how it's been done in WoW and other ones in a PvE scale, pretty easy to figure out, and I would think somewhat easily doable to get that in there. But we really have to examine what that means on a PvP scale, and that sounds really cool. I think that's one of those things that allows you to have a character that only encapsulates a particular profession, and I don't fight, but that's because I got the hiding skill. Every time I got to leave town and go get lumber, I'm just really sneaky about it.
PKs find that skill very useful.
Yep.
Yeah. You're the one waiting in the forest for me when I come out there with my axe.
And usually I'll have a way to detect that you're hidden too, so I can find where you're.
Oh yeah. Counter intelligence.
From the PvP aspect, you kind of got to look at the opposite side of, like, if somebody's hiding on you, how are you going to combat that? And that's a little easier to do, or maybe even easy to ignore on a player versus environment aspect.
Right.
But that definitely needs to be really well thought out for the PvP stuff.
Right.
Cool.
Subterfuge, that was his word.
Subterfuge.
That is a good one.
That's that's a big word.
Yes, that's almost exactly what I said.
Tracking is the counter to hiding. They had the tracking skill.
Oh yes.
Tracking and hiding, that's right. Yeah.
Bring out the dogs.
Yep, that's how they used to get us. That's how the anti-PKs would find us and kill us.
Well, I've got a good section of that on my notebook now. I'm going to make sure I bring that up again with, I think, Richard and Chris Spears were the two main proponents of, let's make sure we get thieving skills in the game, and but we only want to do it if we can do it right. And so I think part of that getting it done right is us talking about it often and early.
That's such an oxymoronic statement. Let's make thieving right.
We have to make it work correctly.
Yes.
I want everybody to be happy when they're stealing things.
But see, I don't want to be happy all the time in the game. If I'm happy all the time in the game, there's no conflict, and then that's no fun.
Correct, and I think that there's a fair exchange there kind of in, on how I've laid my character out. When I go out to the forest to sneak around and get my wood and I get my ass handed to me, I want to feel that within, damn, I just didn't build my character right, or I didn't play the rules of the game correctly. And so in that aspect, I'm unhappy, but there's a path to happiness as long as it seems like there's a path to happiness.
Keep working on those skills for hiding and lumberjacking. Like
Exactly.
I must make the axe hit the wood quieter.
Yes.
Silent lumberjack.
Silencer.
Silent lumberjack. Ooh, wow.
Yeah, lumberjacking. I remember that.
That was good.
So, yes, and that was actually a very simple skill. I've seen that in a few other games, but I did a lot of lumberjacking in UO.
Yeah.
And
UO it was worthwhile doing.
Well, it was necessary. Who wants to buy all this heavy wood off of somebody else? People couldn't put very much on their vendors. The poor vendors, be all bent over trying to hold it, and it wasn't very practical to get it from other players and stuff, and so you ended up harvesting it yourself. So I always had one character that could mine, that could gather wood, that could do other stuff. But we're one character, single character.
That's exactly what was going through my head. That's a tough one for a player to figure out in that context when you're used to having those alts to put that into. And I think Richard gets a big kick out of trying to make sure that that's what that's his challenge to players, I think, is he knows that I'm used to you being able to split off your different identities into different people. I want you to have to think about what that means by me forcing you to have a single character. What does that mean to you? What's most important to you? Or if it's all important, how are you going to pull that off?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, well, I think that's about all the time we have today. So, Rick, thank you very much.
My pleasure. It's been a lot of fun to be here. It feels like it's been about 5 minutes. I could have done a few more hours. So,
Yeah.
so I look forward to catching you guys again on.
We'll keep
Saturday.
everybody wanting more, including yourself.
Okay, excellent. Well, we're here every Saturday, apparently.
Yes. So
Excellent.
you can stop by anytime, and you can bring the rest of your clan or some of your clan, and we can pummel them with questions too.
Now I'll tell them how cool it is here, and I'm not going to tell them about the pummeling. We'll just do that to them when they get here.
It'll be an ambush.
Nobody asks any questions. Just come talk.
You're right. So, okay. Well, thank you, everybody. And those of you watching live, hang on. Don't go anywhere. I got an announcement for you right when we come back. And for everybody on YouTube, we shall see you next week.
Thank you, everybody. See ya.
Thanks.
See you.
Bye, guys.
See you later.